everyone, and welcome to Metabase Join. I'm Cynthia Belusek, Vice President Success Engineering here at Metabase. It's so great to have you here. We have attendees from around the world, and whether you've been with Metabase for years or you're just getting started, we're really glad that you're joining us today. Today is all about helping you get more out of your data, and you'll hear from our team about what we've been building and where we're going, but just as importantly, you'll hear from customers who are using Metabase in real practical ways. We'll have Q&A along the way, so feel free to share your questions in the chat box. Thanks for being here and for being part of the Metabase community. So let's get started. First up is our CEO and founder, Sameer Al-Sakran.
Hello, everybody. Can you see my slides? Yep. All right, so let's get it started. Just by way of introduction, my name is Sameer. I started Metabase about 10 years ago. If you follow the super early Git commits, some fraction was me, though these days I'm more in the shadows. And just, for the most part, I'm the person to blame. So if you don't like something about the product, the pricing, just how things went, I'm the person at fault. So sorry, or you're welcome. I'd like to introduce you to the first Metabase Join. Like, we really should have thrown one of these years ago, but one of the great parts of waiting is that it's gotten so big that it's kind of fun to see how large it is. So there's 2,000 people who signed up. Hopefully you all show up. It's whenever you feel like it. Come and go as you please, but hopefully stay for the entire set of talks. And it's also really fun to reflect on how far Metabase has spread. So, there's core team members in 30 countries. We've got customers in over 100 countries. And, the exact estimate of how many open source users we have is kind of fuzzy, but we've had visitors from like 200 countries, which is practically the entire world. So it's very exciting to see how far it's spread. And we're glad that you all kind of came together to use the product and to just help us on making it better for you as well. In all these conversations, there's usually like the week or two before the talk where I'm just sitting there like struggling with a blank piece of paper. And it's just like, what in the world do I talk about? And like, what does the audience want to hear? What's happening? How can I somehow say something relevant today? And like the fun part of the last, about year is that isn't really how it's felt. There's so much happening. It's all so relevant and things are changing in some ways under the surface. So I think there's a lot of things that are happening that aren't being talked about, but even above the surface, there's tons going on. So in some ways, like the talks have started right themselves. And I think where I'd like to start is just by looking backwards a little bit and in a way trying to draw the connections between how things have happened in the past with what's happening today. And so, sorry, that was me going back in the past by one slide, and now we're back to the present moment. So I think it's funny because one of the things that seems to be happening is there's this gravitation towards the idea of everyone's going to write queries in natural language. That will then be basically a prompt. You can save the prompt instead of the SQL it's generated. And it's kind of funny to me because like one of the things that really sticks in my memory is if you look at magazines back from the 80s, you can see IBM's like ad campaigns and how they were in a lot of places really talking about how SQL is something that's meant to be used by normal people and compared to writing whatever algol or C against DB2 again, maybe even DB. Back in the 70s, it was just so much easier and so simple and natural. And I think that we are today kind of watching the same thing happen with natural language in a way, though I do think that there is a bit of a trap we're falling into where we are treating SQL as a target language. I'll get more into that in a bit, but there's an entire set of conversations happening around like what should that target language be? Should it be a metric language that's actually specific to LLMs, or are we just going to be writing TypeScript and Go going forward? But anyway, long story short, there's also the kind of analogy to mice. So I, got to use my first computer before mice were prevalent, and I got to, get my own first computer, and there was a mouse, and it was really magical and amazing at the time. And I think it's interesting to think about natural language as almost a pointing device or a touch screen. But there is an entire new set of possibilities that open up to how we engage with computers. And I do think that similar to how 30 some odd years after mice became prevalent, we still use a mixture of typing, clicking, touchscreens, and CLIs. And I think that while a lot of really interesting things are happening as far as driving all your programs through natural language and through agents, I do think there's going to remain a mixture of things that rely on our kind of narrative and storytelling verbal skills, as well as kind of the more visual system that we have and being able to see information in a graphical form. So I don't know if anyone has really dialed in what the new UX idioms will be, but things will start happening, and I'm excited to see where we go. The other thing that's kind of funny is like agents as OS has come up over and over and over and over again, and it is kind of cool. So if you haven't used a Metabase MCP with some of the other information you have in your other worlds as also MCPs, like it's actually really fun. Things pop up really easily. There's all kinds of like magical experiences that sort of emerge. And I don't know if we're all going to end up like kind of booting up Claude as our main way of interacting with the software that we buy, but there's already some really fun things that are happening. Kind of going on a bit of a different tangent, but I think I've said this often enough that it bears saying on the record, but I think coding agents are probably the thing that is still underappreciated. So there's obviously a ton of hype around it, from Lovable to Cursor to Claude to what have you. But I do think that they are the disruptive force more in data, more so than all the other things that are happening. And I do think that one of the consequences is product lock-in is going to fade. So I think it'll be easier and easier and easier to re-implement anything you have for a different target. And I think that there's going to be not a ton of defensibility to it. And so people will probably be able to move from Power BI to Metabase to Looker to Metabase to whatever. And I do think the second thing that will start to emerge more and more is the ability to just create your own software. And that software will start looking like data structures, it'll start looking like visualizations, it'll start looking like transformation and enrichment layers. And I think that there's going to be increasingly a turning a lot of data problems into software problems, and those will be generated. Now it's useful as like everything is changing out from under us to think about what isn't changing. And I think a big part of that is analytics is still multiplayer. And I think if it's just you and your chatbot, I think there's a lot that is missing. And so on the consumption side, on the sharing side, on the remixing side, there needs to be a centralized place where all of it lives. And so I think that is something we're very keen to keep building and keep making. I do think correctness is actually really, really annoying. And I don't think it's gotten any better. So one of the formative experiences I had in this was doing a bunch of customer interviews super early on, like back in 2014, and just kind of like adding up like what people spend their time on. And it was interesting in that most analysts I talked to spent most of their days trying to figure out why X wasn't Y somewhere else. And whether this was two different numbers from different sources, whether it was the same number calculated in two different ways, whether it was someone getting an email and realizing that DAUs was wrong by 5% and yelling, but there's always some version of like, why is this number not right? And I think it also bears to say that for most working analysts or data engineers, the time that you spend typing SQL or clicking in a creation UI isn't the rate limiting step. It isn't the bottleneck. It isn't where all of the hard part of it is. And so I think that as we get kind of past the first and second waves of excitement about what code generation can do, it's important to focus on like the things that push you to production. So I think my experience with a lot of code generation has been the first 80% is magical, and then the next 20% takes like forever. And then lastly, just that one of the big reasons that I think some form of BI will stay very, very relevant is just that you need a point of control. And so I think that not all of you are necessarily having to worry about this, but as you start getting more successful, as the company gets bigger, as there are more people, it does tend to become a requirement to have control, auditing, etc. And I do think that the squishy nature of LLM generated SQL and applications is going to actually put more demand on this and not less. So and then I kind of want to get a little cheesy because in some ways this is an especially exciting time for us at Metabase, which is that originally the entire point of Metabase was that we wanted for users to be lazy and to create something that was enjoyable to use. And one of our early taglines was some version of "Don't make me tell you the thing I told you before," or "Don't make me do the things that the computer should be doing for me." And LLMs, they're still kind of shaky, but it's pretty clear that without a ton of fundamental breakthroughs, we're going to end up in a world where you're not going to be sitting there rewriting the window functions for retention for every single time that someone adds a Stripe connector to Fivetran. And I do think that many of the points of Metabase around being accessible to end users, around being simple to use, around being easy for anyone to explore their data are actually only supercharged by having essentially natural language processing that finally works. And so there is a whole lot we're doing that hopefully will just continue the line that we were drawing before. Now, it's not an AI talk without some amount of fear and paranoia and, oh no, the sky is falling. I personally just find the slop portion the most disheartening. And I do think that it will get pretty bad. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I think there's two reasons why I believe it'll get worse. And one of those is the actual stuff we're all building with is fundamentally unreliable. And I think that it's unreliable in ways that aren't immediately obvious or immediately breaking. And I think the second thing that is actually more long-term corrosive is that I do think that we're going to start losing the skills to validate and to verify and to understand what's happening. And so the key part of this is not just that we're going to lose those skills, but that the market will stop demanding those skills. And so, again, I hope that the transition point will come soon and smoothly, but I do think that we should all be ready for numbers just not being as right as they used to be, if that makes any sense. And so what are we doing about this? I think we, in this context, is us at Metabase. I'm sure you're all doing really great and exciting things. Please, share your links in the chat. Tell us what you're up to. Tell us what you're excited by. But in terms of what we're doing, one of the things is we're done. So 59 is out. If you haven't seen it, if you haven't got the email, if you haven't downloaded it, try it out. I think the anchor of it is this idea that we're trying to create a place where the complexity around data lives and an easier point of consumption. So Data Studio is a place where you can transform your data. We've had transforms in the product in some way for quite a while. We're kind of elevating them and making them specifically accessible to everyone. There's a semantic layer, which is kind of distilling what we had before, just making it better with metrics and measures and segments. And there's bulk curation of metadata. There's the ability to have visibility layers. There's a data glossary, but it's fundamentally the chance or a place where for you to just get your house in order, to create a subset that's clean, annotated, the metadata is current on it, and that there's just a block of data that's right. And if you do that, but you don't have to, but we suggest it quite strongly, then agents work better, code generation works better, and there's just generally a more concrete foundation of reuse where you'll be able to know that every time the net retention is used, it's actually your definition of net retention and not whatever random SQL got auto-generated for you. So again, try it out, like it. And we have also included a lot of things around dependency management and just the ability to understand what's broken in your overall system. Did you drop a column and trash 20 dashboards? Was there a metric that was redefined that accidentally breaks something downstream? Is something currently broken? And so there is a control pane for all of that as well. So if you're running active instances where a lot of stuff is happening, both upstream and within itself, this will hopefully save you a couple hours of heartburn every week. Now, This is going out sometime tonight or tomorrow, so consider this the announcement. But we are open sourcing our AI stack. And so both our MCP server is being launched. We haven't, this is not really public, but we have our own MCP server, which is baked into the application itself. There's a Slack integration for our Metabot, as well as natural language query on top of the semantic layer and our agent API. And so this kind of builds on the SQL generation we open source in 59, but essentially all things related to open source consumption are in open source. So that will be cut sometime probably today, maybe or tomorrow. Give it a whirl. Let us know what you think. And happy clouding. And then quickly following that, and I should just say that this does mean that we're breaking our release cadence, and we are going to be shipping 3 versions kind of like one after the other. So if you have a very complicated internal acceptance testing, if you have to run it by compliance, if there's 5 million checks you've got to do inside your company, I'm sorry, but hopefully it's worth it. If not, have fun, enjoy it, try the latest hotness. And then 61 is going to largely be around the fun police. So at some point, you just need to have control, auditing. You want to, put limits on what people can do. You want to better understand what they're doing. You'll want conversational analytics. You'll want to see like how the models are performing, and this will be your place to do it in. And so that, again, currently in flight, and you can expect that sometime in your hands, sometime towards the end of April. With all that, there are longer running threads that I want to share, and you can think of these as the threads that will describe where we're going to over the course of the next year or two. And I think the big one is, if you're watching the code base, there's a lot of refactoring going on. I think a big part of that is moving towards a analytics system that is inspectable, that is isolated or can be isolated, and is verifiable. So I mentioned the correctness is hard and doesn't get easier. We view it as our mission to make the correctness 10 times faster and chiller. So a big thing of what we're pushing forward on is a version of Metabase, or version 5.0 or 6.0, whatever it is these days, that's really centered around making it easy for you to verify whether or not that this number is what it should be. Now, there's a lot of pieces of that puzzle, and those will be coming onto the table kind of like, one at a time. But I will say that we're going to be doing experiments. So we're generally not going to be breaking anything, but like things will move. We're going to be adding features. We will be sunsetting some features that didn't get adoption. And in general, we'll be trying to create the next version of analytics. So I believe that there is a pre and post LLM version of analytics. I think that it is going to take us and everyone else some time to figure out what v.next is, but we are actively building towards that. And we will be running it by you as we go. Specific things you should be expecting. One of the big ones is just files as a source of truth. So this idea of inspectability and immutability is a big one. And we want to be able to just have there be like the content of a Metabase instance that has Git hash. And that we will treat code generation as a first class means of creation, of editing, and it will be something tailored for code generation. We're building, and we'll be releasing this in 162, fingers crossed, but some version of isolated data environments for agents. And this is where you'll be able to just let agents do their thing and not worry about them trashing your instance. So I think that today, if you're using a raw MCP server and you're actually writing to production instance, I think you're living very, very dangerously. And I really suggest you don't. But I do think we are working actively on a way to create these containers that are isolated and that are safe for agents to just do whatever they're doing. And metadata management is a big part of this. It's really messy, so there's lots of stuff we're doing there. We're on version 3 of this internally, but we are building a robot data scientist where you'll be able to ask questions that are long form. And there will be, this is something where you'll ask it a question, it'll do a bunch of analysis for you, you'll come back in 45 minutes and have another cycle, kind of go back and forth with it. But it is meant to be a deep dive. And so this will come out, fingers crossed, 62, but or at least this is our current version of it. But we are actively working on a version of like the robot data scientist, the robot analyst, as you want to say it. And then in what hopefully is not surprising, we are going to be putting a lot of energy into building tools that let you verify and observe like the accuracy of all of your metrics, all of your dashboards, all of your transforms. And there's a lot that's going into this. So it's kind of like a one slide wonder, but there is going to be many releases worth of improvements here. And we do view it as one of the most important things that we have to offer, which is, it'll be really easy for all of us to one-shot stuff in Claude, but it'll be the question of like, all right, can you actually use that number? And so we're going to be putting a lot of energy behind answering the question like, you either can use that number, you can't, or here's the thing that needs to be fixed in Claude, please fix it. And so this correctness in the loop is a big part of what we're up to. If you've used code generation tools, having unit tests or some way for it to verify what it's doing is right or wrong, static linting otherwise is like pretty key to the entire experience. And I think there's good news, which is the future's coming. The bad news is it's on us to invent it. In some ways it'll happen to you regardless of whether you try or not. But I do think we all have an opportunity to create, v.next of analytics. And, I'm excited about what we're up to. I'm also excited about what all of you are up to as well. So like I said, share, converse amongst yourselves. And if you are either in the US or keen to hop on a plane to meet all of us in person, we are throwing our first in-person conference this October. It'll be happening in Denver, Colorado. And so I hope you all come, or hope you all will come and bring your friends, bring your family, bring your pets, and hope to see you there. And I think we're into Q&A.
Yes, there are a lot of questions. Can you hear me? Yes, I can see my face, so that means you can. Great. Okay, lots of questions. I'll just start at the top here. There's a lot of questions around configuring Metabot and self-hosted. So with these changes, are we able to use Metabot and self-hosted Metabase?
Yes, as of the beta tomorrow.
Awesome. Great. Sorry, I'm just checking off my question. And then what were you thinking? There's a question around what would the Metabot data scientist feature be able to, would the Metabot data scientist feature be able to work with granular permissions?
It depends on what you mean by granular permissions. I think the general model that we're applying is there will be permissions that are respects, and it will have a sandbox within which it's allowed to play. So, there will be some amount of granularity. It will likely, for the most part, run under the permissions of the person that invokes it. And that is our main model there.
Great. There's a lot of questions around, so sorry, I'm trying to read and scroll at the same time. Can the semantic layer be edited in code to have a single controlled source of truth?
Right now, yes, but the format's not great. I think that one of the big things we're doing right now is cleaning up the on-file representation. So it's narrowly true today, but I think it'll actually be pleasant soon.
Great. Sarah made a comment that I think it would be great for you to expound upon, that you made the point that as LLMs keep improving, product lock-in fades, bespoke everything is coming. You didn't say it explicitly, but the implication feels clear that betting on open source as our foundation makes more and more sense over time. Is there anything you want to add or talk about with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll drop a grenade in the punch bowl, which is, I don't know how open source survives the world of code generation. So I think that there's going to be a lot of question marks as to how open source licenses adapt, if at all. I do think that maybe the key idea is that whether something is open sourced or not, if Power BI has an MCP server or an API, you can just reproduce it wherever you want. And I think that even today, this doesn't really work. I mean, but it'll work soon. You can just like take a photo or a screenshot of your Power BI dashboard and have like Claude MCP or probably GPT like run MCP commands to recreate it. This is still not ready for prime time, but I don't think it'll take a ton of foundational model improvements to make that real. So I do think open source definitely has a story here, and like we are fundamentally like really betting on open source. But I think there's, even for closed source products, I think the idea of lock-in, even of data lock-in, is going to get harder and harder. And if I can add another layer to that, I do think Iceberg is something people are like really gravitating towards. I think one of the key reasons for that is the ability to have your data itself not have data warehouse lock-in. And so at some point, if your data is portable and you can reproduce all the content by just taking screenshots and uploading it to a foundational model, you can like swap tools much easier than you could 1 year, 2 years, 10 years ago.
So kind of a similar question, how does this trend towards having AI implementation and analytics change the role of the frontline data analyst supporting Metabase users in a corporate environment today? What skills do you see the analysts developing for the future to continue helping their users?
I think I'll start with answering the inverse question and then kind of go to the question itself, which is, I think for a long time, you could get a job as an analyst or data scientist by just knowing SQL or Python. And that if you were able to take a question from a human being and translate that to SQL, you had a job. I think everyone should say that like that's not really true anymore. And so you will be still valuable if you know SQL deeply, but that a superficial level of SQL knowledge or Python or data science is not going to be that valuable. I think the things that will remain deeply valuable are understanding how to build trust in numbers. So in a way, I think, being a data QA person is going to become more and more and more valuable. I don't know what the job description will look like. I think we're still going to call them analysts or data engineers or data scientists, but I do think that is definitely going to get more valuable. I do think that your toolbox will change. And so, if you're not good with SQL code generation, SQL generation, Python generation, you really should start now. Like I do think that's becoming a fundamental tool in the toolbox. If you don't know how to use it, it's not that you're going to be left behind. It's that there's an entirely different set of tools that people are going to start using. That's clearly one of them. And I do think that knowing how to use a coding agent is its own skill. And I do think that the time that you spend developing that is valuable, and so you should develop that. And then lastly, I do think that the ability to quantitatively model the world has always been valuable for analysts. I think it gets more so. So if you're just saying, dear Claude, is my conversion up or down? Then, okay, cool. But you're probably going to want to dig deeper. You're going to want to understand what the underlying dynamics are. You'll want to have like deeper hypotheses you can test. And that ability to create those hypotheses, to understand what things mean, to, again, know enough stats to be dangerous. I think all these things will remain valuable, even as the job of converting human language to SQL fades.
Great. A couple of questions. Somebody asked about successful use cases where Metabase is used not just for reporting, but for triggering actions. And actually, we have a really great presentation coming later in this afternoon from Zach from Framework Computer that will touch on that. So stay tuned. Sorry. So Sameer, one thing I think might be interesting for people to hear about is how do you decide what to put in the product next?
I listen to all of you a lot. So this sounds kind of cheesy, but I'm endlessly asking the question internally of like, what do people want? And most things revolve around that. What do people want? What problems do they have? How bad do they want it? And how big the problems are? And, there is a combination of us trying to solve the big problems. So I think, we've heard loud and clear that some version of we want natural language querying for my boss who doesn't really understand computers to be able to ask questions and get the right number. Now, I think that's really, really hard to deliver today. I do think we're doing the things that will get us there. So there's kind of that just general, quite literally like a list of all the things people want, what they complain about, what they desire. And then there is what we put forward as our solution to that. And some of those solutions are really easy. So it's like, hey, we need to have rate limits or quota limits on token spend. Cool, we're going to put that in. That one's easy. Some things are hard, and so we will generally have these like longer arcs that we're on. But the key thing is that it all starts with our best approximation of what I call the demand layer, which is just like, what do people want? How much do they want it? And how easy is it for us to give them what they want? And what is like the thing that solves the problem they have as opposed to the button they're asking for? So I can spend like 5 hours talking about this. Maybe we'll do this at the real life conference, but there's more. But hopefully that's enough to at least give you a sense of the style and the principles of how we do it.
Everyone's really excited about some of the new features you just talked about, and there's a bunch of questions about that I thought maybe we could cover really quickly. So one person is asking if the MCP server, Metabot, or Slackbot will be available for self-hosted.
Yes.
And then will Metabase Cloud also have the MCP server access?
Yes, we will have MCP servers on your specific instance. So it won't be like you'll be adding your specific instance to Claude or GPT. You won't actually be adding mcp.metabase.com, but the answer is yes.
Great. And then I thought this was a really interesting question, especially because of the design emphasis that we have here at Metabase. I would love for you to talk about design. And then somebody asked, what about product designers working on such software? What level of technical expertise do you think they require when they're using something like Metabase?
So sorry, I'm going to answer a couple of those in a couple of different ways. So, because I think there is a lot in there, and so let me try to untangle as best I can. And whoever asked this, if I don't answer your question, please chime in again, and I'll try to do better. But the role of design hasn't really changed. And so I still think there is a notion of visual design, there's product design, there's UX design, there's brand, etc. And so I think that as you are working on either data problems or data infrastructure or what have you, I think one of the key, like there's a question like what level of technical expertise do you think they require? I think it depends on how high you want to rise. And having a strong understanding of the underlying physics of what you're designing is really, really helpful. And your ability to generate sample data for whatever it is you're designing becomes really important. So for example, if you're designing a UX for scheduling transforms, if you understand dependency graph, if you understand how things are scheduled, if you understand roughly how long things take, if you understand what kinds of errors show up without there being a product doc, and if you have some intuition for how all this fits together into the bigger picture, you're probably going to do a much better job. Now, do you need this to be employable? No, like obviously not. But this is kind of a superpower where it will let you actually short circuit the loop of you design something, you realize that it breaks this, that, or that. You design another thing, it breaks that, that, or that. Or conversely, where you're being given super micro.
Sorry, I clicked on something.
It's okay. You're being given super micro instructions. So again, to rise to higher levels of product design, it is extremely valuable to understand the world that you're designing for, as opposed to just being a skilled designer. I hope I answered your question. I don't know if I did. If I didn't, chime back in.
Awesome. Thanks, Sameer. There's a lot of questions everyone's very excited about all the new features. Will self-hosted Metabot work with any LLM model, or will there be restrictions in the model customers can use?
So today we work way, way, way better with Claude. You can use, we tried it with Llama, we tried it with the various GPT models, tried with Gemini, tried with DeepSeek, Kimi K2, a bunch of other ones. But as of right now, we're specifically tuned for Anthropic's Claude models. There is not going to be any specific limitation where you can't use another model. It's just we've tuned things for that. Now, The agent code is open source. So if you have it in you to go in and help us improve it for other models, we'll take the help for sure. You might have picked up on the fact that like we're kind of a Claude shop internally. So much of our own usage is Anthropic. Now, like some of this is just like, I have 3 different models that I use for different tasks. I tend to stick to Claude because I personally find it like matches my own like style of prompting best, and like I get the best outcomes of that. But there's no like lock-in per se. It's just the question of like which models we're tuning for. And we do have a big benchmark suite that we're running on this. We are trying to maintain, an even performance envelope. There's a lot of things we're going back and forth on, like how much do you want to expose certain characteristics of certain models, so image analysis versus not. But kind of the punchline of all of it is, for today, we're tuned for Claude. Tomorrow, we'll be tuned for others, help us tune it. We don't intend for there to be any specific lock-in, but just in practice, 60 will be Claude-centric.
There's a question about the event in Colorado. I can tell you more about that since I've been working on that. But we'll have an interest form that's at metabase.com/join after this event. So right now, that is our website for this event. And then shortly after this event ends, you'll be able to sign up for more information. And obviously, if you're attending this event, we'll send you information as registration becomes available as well, which should be early summer, late May, somewhere in that time frame. So great. A lot of people are asking about comparing the Metabase product and our transformation layer to some other products that do similar things on the market. I'd love for you to talk about kind of where you think we are now and where you think this will go, and some of the advantages of using Metabase and for this context.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a short, medium, and long term. In the long term, it's all interchangeable. We're all going to be like using OSI, definition of the open semantic interchange format if it works. So long term is long term. I think short term, just try us out, see if you like it. The big thing is we think that having all of your transforms in one place is actually going to lead to a better overall experience. We are doing a lot of dependency graph analysis and a lot of subgraph and like lots of other things we're doing for keeping your instance from breaking and being able to discover breakage and for observability. And so that we will only be able to offer if your transformation graph is in us as well. We're going to be doing acceleration. We're going to be moving like workloads from transform time materialization to query time for adaptive caching. So there's a lot of things we're doing that rely on the Lego of transforms being inside of our walls. And for those features, to get the benefit of those features in the medium term, you should be on our. So short term, use it if you like it. It's convenience. Medium term, there's going to be a lot that we're building around anti-entropy, manageability, observability that relies on us being the single pane of glass that you hold. And long term, we're all going to sync with each other. It's all going to be the same file format, and like it's all chill.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about how we use Metabase inside Metabase today? What are some of your favorite ways that we use our product?
I mean, this is just like lately, I've been really, really spending a lot of time with some version of our pylon tickets, our grain calls, and stats as an MC, and our own internal like Metabase instance as an MCP, and just having Claude pull it all together. So that's been kind of like the thing that I've been playing with. I wouldn't say that it is, the thing that we really use heavily. I think the thing that is used heavily is like we just constantly pass Slack links around. So I think that, many of our conversations end up having like numbers attached. So we're talking about things and we're pulling up numbers. We're talking about other things. We're having our disagreements or discussions, and we are often pulling in actual information. And that lives on Metabase. It's computed there. We're sharing with each other, and the ability to quickly tap into what's actually happening has just been a core part of how we talk to each other. And so I think that is the thing that's like actually meaningful and important. And I do want to talk a little bit about pricing because there's a bunch of questions there. So Metabot will be open source and free. So there would not be an extra charge for it. And then self-hosted data studio will be available. And the other thing that caught my eye is OSS for self-hosted and clarity on which features go to where. So I think the best way to understand what we're doing as a business, because we are an open source product first and foremost. We also do have a business attached, which pays my rent, which is pretty great. Rent for everyone else on the team, so we're very fond of that. But more seriously, the general line we have is if it's related to consumption or related to just any company having analytics, it's free. And we do think that natural language querying is part of that. Now, we're going to sell you solutions to two things. One of those is embedding, which is if you want to use our you want to use our widgets, our pixels, and put your logo on and sell to your customers. That is something we commercialize. And the second thing that we charge money for is fundamentally our manageability features. So as you start going from 50 to 100 to 1,000 users, there's going to be solutions to the problems that you face that we will sell you. We try very hard not to have that be invasive into the core, like I'm just 5 people having a normal life setup, but we are establishing that as the guiding lines. So for Metabot specifically, asking Metabot questions, obviously, like bring your own model, so it's free in open source. But for things related to auditing, analytics, controls, like things that your boss's boss will demand, those are the things that we are monetizing as like our proprietary version. Hopefully that was clear and predictable and no one would be surprised. But sorry, Cynthia, go back to your set of questions.
No, I appreciate that. So there's a question around the actions feature of Metabase. Are we going to expand that or adding any more functions about putting information directly into tables?
Yeah, I have a really, really horrible answer, which is it depends on how much you want. So it's in there. We're kind of playing with it a little bit. We're thinking about using more heavily and investing more into it. I think the really fundamental question is like, are people using it? And so if this is something that's important to you, chime in on the GitHub issues, let us know. It's absolutely a part of the product that we can kind of roll downhill on and build a lot more. But we are also having to be careful about, again, going back to like the question earlier about how do we make product decisions. A lot of it is just like what people want. And so if you raise your hand and like you say, I want extra things for actions, we're very, very excited to build more on that front.
Yeah, and I'll just plus one on that. And all of our feature requests and bugs are publicly available in our GitHub repository in the issues tab. If you thumbs up emoji it, we do have analytics around that. If you have paid support with Metabase, anytime you mention a feature request or bug with us, we also flag that and have that tallied. So we have reports around what customers are asking about. So please do. That makes all of our jobs easier and makes us develop a better product for you. So, Sameer, there's a question about your eyewear. I don't know if you know who makes it.
I see Berlin. I guess that's super interesting, but yeah.
So yes, feel free to acquire your own Sameer glasses. So.
Strong. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. Can you talk a little bit about how we use LLMs and AI within the company today? You mentioned using MCP servers and connecting to our tools, but can you talk a little bit about how we're using it for development today?
It's kind of a free-for-all in that we don't have a strong party line on what exactly people are required to do as Metabase employees. I do think everyone has missions, and they are asked to use the best tools for their mission. And so for code, fundamentally the mission is, deliver a feature, deliver a bug fix, deliver, a performance improvement. And we have lots of different coding agents we're using. There's generally, skills that we're building up for our own code base. There's, search servers we're doing for our code as well. There's a lot of things that we're building up towards that, but it's all happening inside of the fundamental loop of a human submits a PR, a human reviews it, and then we have a QA process that makes sure that it's reasonable. So I don't have a sense for what percentage of the code that's going into the repo is LLM generated versus human generated. And I don't think this is a situation where we'd ever enforce things on workflows on our engineers or community members. But in general, we view it as a tool. And if the tool does a good job for a specific problem that we're on, cool. If not, not. So, and there's an important thing in what I'm saying, which is we're still shipping software to 100,000 servers. And we kind of need to make sure that there's not slop in there. So we are still running a fairly disciplined engineering organization, and there's a lot of surface area to what we do. And so we do take quality very, very seriously. And so we are going to be using LLMs where appropriate, but we're not going to just someone open up the floodgates and be like, whatever PR happens, whatever happens. So it's a slightly more rigorous than that. I don't know if that gives you comfort or if that sounds scary, but that's what it is.
Thanks, Sameer. Avi is really excited about the dependency graph. That's actually one of our favorite features on the success engineering team as well. And excited about the benefits of it, but that it's a huge ask to migrate transforms over to Metabase. Is there a possibility that we'll have the ability to import or keep wanting to use the word transform into transforms with Metabase?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Ken. I got lost in transforms.
I just really got obsessed with that word all of a sudden. Will customers have the ability to move from other products to Metabase? Will they be able to take their existing definitions from another product and be able to import it into Metabase in the future?
Yes, with the caveat that we don't support all features that other products have. So I believe that there is a DBT to Metabase converter. It works on 80% of our internal transforms, but we will be offering tools to do that for sure.
Great. And then there's some questions about specific databases and specific features. So one about various Athena features that aren't supported and MySQL features, or some features that are available only on MySQL and Postgres. How do we make decisions around what features of what databases to support, and what's your thoughts around that?
Issue upvotes. We literally look at all the GitHub issues every month, look at all the upvotes and the thumbs ups, all the comments, and we make our decisions as to how much to support given databases purely based on what you tell us. So, we obviously have our favorite databases. We always have the ones that we enjoy working with, but the entire decision-making apparatus for what we do for database support is run by all of you. So if you're not commenting or upvoting on the issues that matter to you in GitHub, then your voice is not being heard. But the answer to all of these things is literally just, we look at that monthly report, see what people want, and then schedule accordingly.
Yes, thumbs up emoji on those issues, please. And then Thomas asked, what are you most excited for in the next 3 to 6 months?
Good question. I think it's the robot data scientist. So I think that there is a lot of things that are happening inside the walls. I think there's a lot of puzzles we've cracked, and I do think that on the 3 to 6 month time frame, that's probably the thing I'm most excited about. There are other things I think are more actually useful or more demanded by customers, but my own personal excitement is there.
Cool. There's also some lobbying for various GitHub issues in the chat, which I support and encourage. Pop in your favorite and upvote for your friends. So great. We're getting close to the end of time. Sameer, are there any other topics or questions that you wish that I would have asked you today?
I'm just going through the top questions. I'm trying to figure out which ones did none that I can think of right now. But Yeah, sorry, I'm scrolling, everyone. It goes slowly. Lots of questions. Screen, application screen. Yeah, that's all I got.